dog followed his sick owner to the hospital. What happened next will melt your heart. Dogs are often said to be man's best friend, and there are many viral videos on the internet that prove this age-old adage. No matter how old you are, as long as you love your four-legged canine friend, then they will love you right back just as much, if not more. Usually due to their short lifespan, owners are the ones who worry about their furry friends. But this story proves just how much these amazing animals care for their owners as well. The story took place in a town on the island of Bayukada, which is located just off the coast of Istanbul, Turkey, and it happened back in 2021. It had started off like any normal day for one elderly lady and her golden retriever. They woke up at their regular time and started their daily routine. The lady made herself some breakfast and made sure to give her adorable canine his as well. Once that was done, the lady decided that it was time to go for their morning walk. They always tried to get out at least twice a day, once in the morning and again in the evening, in order to stay as fit and healthy as possible. Despite trying to keep active for her health, the elderly lady did suffer from various health conditions, including some issues with her heart. As the elderly lady was getting ready for her walk, she suddenly started feeling a bit funny. All of a sudden, she couldn't seem to catch her breath, and she could feel her heart beating like crazy. Knowing that none of these things were a good sign, the elderly lady decided to call out to her daughter, whom she lived with. The woman had moved in with her daughter after a particularly bad health scare that had left her needing help when no one was around. The woman's daughter quickly rushed over after hearing her mother's panicked cry and asked her what was wrong. The elderly woman explained that she had trouble breathing and that she was starting to feel quite lightheaded. Worried that it could be a heart attack, the daughter led her mother over to a chair and told her to sit down whilst she called an ambulance. While the daughter was doing this, the elderly woman's golden retriever made his way over to his owner and set his head in her lap. The animal could clearly sense that something was wrong and that his owner was in distress. Wanting to offer as much comfort as he could, the dog stayed as close to the elderly woman as possible. This seemed to help the old woman, as she was able to calm down a little bit by petting her dog's head. This also made it easier for her to breathe as well. Only a few minutes after being called, the ambulance crew arrived to assess the situation. The two paramedics first began to give the elderly woman a checkup whilst she was still in the house. They thought that if a condition wasn't too serious and could be treated at home, it would save the woman the stress and the trouble of going to the hospital. But after a few minutes of checking the elderly woman's heartbeat, pulse, and breathing ability, the two paramedics decided that it would be best if she went to the hospital. In that case, if anything went wrong, she would be in the proper place for immediate care. After deciding this, the paramedics wheeled the elderly woman to the ambulance to drive her to the hospital. But as the elderly woman was being helped into the vehicle, something incredible happened. The golden retriever, who had been following his owner through everything, went right up into the ambulance and watched as the elderly woman was secured inside before trying to sneak into the vehicle himself. Sadly, before the worried pup could make his way inside the van, the elderly woman's daughter grabbed him by the collar and pulled him back out. Despite the dog's big puppy eyes, the medics would not allow the animal to ride inside due to health policies and safety. They shut the doors, likely assuming that the dog would wait at the house for his owner's return. The woman then held onto the dog's collar and told him to stay, as she tried to figure out what she needed to do for her mother. Once the paramedics and the elderly woman were ready to go, the ambulance began to drive off towards the hospital. But as the vehicle drove down the road, one of the paramedics noticed something amazing in their mirror. The golden retriever was racing after the van. The dog followed the ambulance for several miles, and the entire time, the ambulance crew kept an eye on him to make sure that he was safe and didn't get injured by another car. Once the ambulance made it to the hospital, the paramedics got the elderly woman out of the van and took her inside of the hospital so that she could get settled in a room and be seen by a doctor. But when the dog arrived not long after the vehicle, what happened next will melt your heart. The adorable pup walked right up to the hospital doors and stopped just before entering. He then continued to stay in front of the building, watching as his owner was taken off to be checked over by a doctor and given the help that she needed. After his owner was taken into a separate room, the dog sat down and waited for her to return. He never once stepped foot inside of the hospital though. It was almost as if the incredible canine knew that he wasn't allowed in the building. Whilst he was waiting, one of the paramedics who had driven his owner to the hospital returned and gave the dog a treat to thank him for being such a good and loyal dog. The elderly woman was told that she had suffered a mild heart attack and that she would need to stay in the hospital for the following few days to be monitored. During those days, though, the golden retriever refused to move from his spot outside of the hospital. He wanted to stay as close to his owner as possible, as he was obviously afraid that if he left, he would never see her again. The paramedics made sure to give the pup treats whenever they passed him by, and the elderly woman's daughter stopped by the hospital twice a day to give the pup his breakfast and his dinner. For 3 days, the dog waited for his owner to return. Then, finally, on the 4th day, he was rewarded with the wonderful sight of his owner. She had been deemed healthy enough to return home, and she was happy to be out of the hospital at last. She wasn't the only one, though. Upon seeing the elderly woman, the golden retriever sprang to his feet and began to give her as many kisses as he could without suffocating her. The elderly woman laughed. She was glad to be okay, and what's more, she couldn't believe that her adorable pup had waited so long for her to get better. The elderly woman and her dog returned home, only this time there was an added item to the duo's regular routine. The elderly woman had been told by her doctor that she had to take some tablets to help with her heart. Once the golden retriever picked up on the fact that his owner had to take something to make sure she stayed healthy, he would sit next to her and make sure that she took her tablets before going about their day. The dog did this as he wanted to make sure that she was as healthy as she could be, so that they had a lot more time left with one another. The faithful pup would even grab the bottle of pills for the elderly woman if she forgot to take them and drop it off on her lap. This amazing dog's display of love and loyalty shows that these animals truly are man's best friend. What an adorable story. Have you ever heard of other kinds of animals being as loyal and affectionate to their owners? Let me know if you have in the comments below. And if you want to hear even more tales about amazing animals, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.